Okay, well, why don't we get started? I think I see most of the familiar faces and people who have agenda items are here. So welcome everyone to the, what month of it? What month is it? It's April.
April.
The April PowerShell community call. I genuinely kind of forgot there. Yeah, welcome everyone to the April PowerShell community call. It's kind of special edition where some of us are in the conference room here. We have special guest Jeff Hicks in the room with us.
Hey, hi, Jeff.
Yeah, so we'll get started for, I think, a number of folks here who are MVPs. It's MVP Summit as well, so I'm sure people are jumping in MVP Summit. So glad everyone could join us. I have posted the issue, so if anyone has, or the discussion thread, I'll post it again. So if anyone has questions, feel free to throw them in the chat or throw them in this thread. We'll be working down kind of the comments there for the agenda items. And so the first one that we'll start off with is the latest 7.4 preview that should be coming out just yet, but Dongbo, if you are available, maybe to just chat a little bit about some of the changes that are coming.
The preview for, the 7.4 preview 3 will be coming out today if everything goes well. Like we are basically finished the release build, and today will just be the release, like publishing the release to the public. So as for the changes, it's basically everything starting from the 7.4 preview 3, preview 2 until the latest change in the main in the master branch. So yeah, we're gonna have a change log so for people to reference.
Cool. Thanks, Dongbo. We'll look out for the change log, and we'll be announcing some of the cool features coming up, today or tomorrow. Next, we have Paul to talk a little bit about WDAC audit work. Paul, do you want to chat about this a little bit?
Yeah, let me just share real quickly. So yeah, I just wanted to mention this real quick. It's a new feature. It's not in the preview yet. Probably it'll be in the next preview. But I just want to let people know that this is coming. It's kind of obscure. It's not going to affect a lot of people that use PowerShell because it's a Windows feature only. It's a Windows feature called WDAC, or Windows Defender Application Control. And it's basically an application control that's applied to an entire system, a high-value system that you want to protect. And basically the way it works is that only applications, binaries that are known and approved by policy are allowed to run on the machine. And that also includes script and script files. In PowerShell's case, if a script file is known and trusted by the policy, it's run without any restriction in full language mode. If it's not known, if it's an anonymous script block, or if it's an unsigned script file and it's not trusted, then it runs in a constrained mode with constrained language mode. The problem with this is that when the policy isn't enforced and constraints are applied to script because it's untrusted, or maybe a module that it's dependent on is untrusted, scripts can fail in unpredictable ways and confusing ways. So it's hard to get your scripts running correctly when you're running under this WDAC enforcement policy mode. So what this new feature is basically just some more logging that was added. It's an experimental feature called PSWDAC audit logging. And the idea is that when the policy, you can put the policy in enforcement mode or in audit mode. When the policy is in audit mode, no restrictions apply. But when you run PowerShell, you'll get a little notice basically saying that it's being run in something now called constrained language audit mode. No restrictions are applied. The only thing that's going on is that it now emits new logging information, ETW logs, about restrictions that would be applied if the policy was flipped to enforcement mode. So for example, if you run a PowerShell shell and you run, a script called test1.ps1. It's not signed and recognized by the policy. And so when it runs, it's going to run without any restrictions. It's going to run fine. It's not going to error out, but you'll get logging information, and it's going to be in the PowerShell core analytic channel. And it's a new log event ID 16387, and the kind of message you're going to get is to say, okay, it's a DAC audit message. There'll be a title about what the restriction would be applied. It'll be a message that basically tells you what restriction would be applied if you were running in enforcement mode. And in this case, it's a very simple issue. When you're running in enforcement mode, PowerShell does not allow you to access .NET APIs, or it does just a very small subset of .NET APIs. This is basically saying that the .NET System Console write line a static method is being called, and in enforcement mode is untrusted script, and so it wouldn't be allowed if you had the policy in enforcement mode. It also includes information about where in the script the problem is, so you get the script name, the script line and character, and also a fragment of the script line where the issue is. And this is the issue is where we're calling a .NET API that's not allowed in untrusted script. Also, one other thing that it has is a fully qualified ID. And the idea here is that this won't change. It would be localized. And I hope eventually to have documentation where you can use this qualified ID to look up documentation and get more information, talking about why the restriction is applied, what its purpose is, and that sort of thing. And that'll be coming probably later. One other thing real quickly, this code will do as well is you can set, if you set the debug preference to break, then when you run the script in audit mode, not only will it emit the audit logs, it will also drop into the debugger when it hits something, a restriction that would be applied. It's not being applied, that would be applied if you had policy enforcement. And the hope here is that it just might make it a little bit easier if you drop into the debugger. It just allows you just to use the debugger to explore a little bit more about where your script's at, if it's a complex script and what's going on. Not sure how helpful that is. And it only will work if you happen to be running the script in like a PowerShell shell that has the built-in command line debugger. So it just drops in the debugger for you. And again, that's just something that's experimental. I'm not sure if that's useful, but it might be if you're trying to, again, trying to get your scripts to run in the WDC policy. So that's basically it. If there's questions, I can reply more offline.
Awesome, thanks, Paul. And so next we got some OpenSSH updates from Tess.
Alrighty, hi folks. Quick update on OpenSSH. 9.3 was released upstream last month, so we've received a few inquiries on GitHub about when we will be releasing 9.3 for Windows. I just wanted to talk about why we're not prioritizing a release for this. Mainly the delta between 9.2 and 9.3 upstream is a few security fixes that are not applicable to Windows. The upstream SSH agent security fix is regarding per hop destination constraints, and that's a feature that we haven't implemented on Windows yet. So neither the vulnerability or the fix is applicable, but it is still in our backlog to get the Windows SSH agent on parity with that upstream behavior. And then the second memory safety problem with get RR set by name is also not applicable to Windows OpenSSH because we do not support that method. And then the other new features and bug fixes in 9.3, we figured they were pretty minor and did not really meet the minimum criteria for us to sort of justify the overhead of pulling in the upstream changes and doing a release at this time. If there are any features that you think should be created for the release, let us know and we can sort of reevaluate. We did, however, release 9.2.2.0 this week with some patches to the 9.2.0 release. This new release contains a security fix for LibreSSL. So that has LibreSSL 3.7.2 up from LibreSSL 3.6.1. So make sure you upgrade when you get a chance. And then there were a few other patches that were mainly community PRs. So thank you for those. The first was fixing an early end of file termination, which was happening when people were trying to run git clone on large repos over SSH. So thank you for this fix, and also to Vivian for spearheading the review of that. There was a lot of push from the community to get that in, so if anyone does still run into issues, let us know. One of the other fixes was related to the SSH agent adding UTF and FIDO keys from non-Windows agents like Fedora, so that should be working now. And then there was a console output page fix where the SSH client binaries were not respecting the existing console output page settings. So now the client binaries will remember those settings and then change them back once the client command has been run. And then the last thing was just fully removing the mark of the web from SCP and SFTP downloads, which we have talked about during the past few community calls. So that should be back to 3.9.0 behavior. And that was everything from this release. Please let us know if you find any issues when using it. And thanks for listening. I'll hand it back over.
And Tess, where's the best place people can reach out for feedback?
Yeah, I'll post a link to where to submit issues and also the link to the latest release.
Awesome, thank you so much. And next we have Amber going to talk about some PS-GET updates and some compat module stuff.
Yeah. So we had a release of PowerShell GET a couple weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago. And that was the accumulation of about like 3 months worth of work where we were moving off of the NuGet client APIs. We decided to move off of that because we were really limited by their APIs, and it prevented us from making some really important perf improvements, including adding parallelism. So the last release, the vast majority of the repository was refactored off of those APIs. Beta 21 will be in a couple of weeks, and that's going to finish that refactoring. So we'll be completely off of those APIs by then. We are also going to be integrating compat PowerShell GET, which is right now a completely separate module. So we've added that as a dependency to PowerShell GET so that users can just use a find module and all of the v2 commandlets with PowerShell GET v3. So hopefully that'll make that transition process a little bit easier. We were concerned, especially in CI, if folks updated to PowerShell GET v3, they would be unable to actually install the compat module. So hopefully this makes that process a little bit easier. With Beta 21, we are also going to address other bug fixes. If there's anything that you find with Beta 20 or any of the previous releases that are super important, probably not related to perf improvements because we already realized that and are kind of working on that, particularly with uninstall module. But if there's any other issues that you guys encounter, please open up an issue on GitHub, reach out to us and let us know so that we can address that in the next couple releases. And also one more thing that I wanted to add is that hopefully we'll have a more continuous flow from here on out. So I think we're trying to release on a more consistent cadence, probably like monthly until we actually GA. So please be on the lookout for the next release. Again, probably in early May, the first week of May or so. And that's all. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Amber. And so I'll let you respond to some of the, I think there's a few questions in chat, so just keep an eye out there. Get back to the agenda. Patrick, would you like to demo some stuff on the native command piping work?
Yeah. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Give it a sec to load. All right. So anyone familiar with using native executables, especially on non-Windows platforms, has probably run into the issue where if an executable returns bytes, if part of the workflow involves piping those bytes to another executable, it just doesn't work in PowerShell. It tries to encode it, turn it into a string, and then send it across. That's not going to work. So one of the changes I've been working on is having that no longer be the case. So if it sees two native executables, it just hooks up the streams together. It doesn't literally create a pipe for them both to use, but it does just send the bytes across. So here we are in the current version of PowerShell. And if I try to do this, which is just downloading one of the PowerShell release artifacts that is a tar GC, and I download it with curl and try to pipe to tar, it's not going to work. So yeah, just unrecognized archive format, it's completely destroyed. Now if we go to the new one, it just works. Included in that it is also redirection. So redirecting curl, and then now we have just a normal a working archive that's just redirected from a native executable. Another thing that will work is just piping bytes. So this will work. This is just invoke web request, gets the content, sends it across as a strongly typed byte array. You can also just pipe bytes as is. If a byte comes across the pipeline, it'll just write it to the stream instead of trying to, figure out where the new lines are, anything like that. So that works now. And that's pretty much it. It makes that work. So anytime you've come across install instructions that have an executable piping to an executable, and it just won't work, and you have to go to bash, that should work after this gets put in. Any questions?
I think you answered it along the way, but I was wondering if it would be possible to force this behavior from native XE to a PowerShell pipeline. I think you said just pipe bytes, right?
Yes. So that the direction of PowerShell to a native command, that will work. There is not currently any integrated way to take a native command's output and just have it, right, in a variable as bytes. You could redirect to a file and then get the bytes of that file. And I have some ideas of how one might be able to do this in the future, but I'm not including it in that PR because it'll be more complicated.
Enough. And just spitballing, but what if one had like a value from pipeline byte array parameter as a way to ensure that one could make that bind? But definitely not asking for this PR, shutting up now. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how you would define that on a. Oh, I see what you mean. that would be on the downstream command.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different ways. I don't think the parameter binder doesn't know that much at that point. It's already too late. But that is definitely, you know, one of the avenues that's being considered.
Well, thank you. This is awesome.
And Patrick, do we have an estimate on when this might reach a preview?
It's pretty close. It's still in a PR right now, but it's very close to being merged. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was the next preview, but I don't want to state that as fact. But certainly before GA.
Cool, that's awesome.
At least as an experimental feature. I should state that.
Awesome, thanks, Patrick.
Thank you.
And then, so for the next, if there's no other questions with this, Sean, I think, has a doc update?
Yeah, so let me share my screen out here. All right, so last month we touched on this briefly. We had a new article from Mikey Lombardi about creating class-based DSC resources for Azure machine configuration. We added a new article describing PS readline key handlers and how to set that up, especially adding information about configuring your Mac OS terminal applications to support Alt key keyboard chords. So check that out. As always, we had several contributions from the community, and I want to thank one of our regular contributors, Emil Larson. He posted a blog post about how to contribute to the docs repository. So check that out. And for this month, we've got 2 new articles in the Crescendo documentation here. Crescendo 1.1 preview release includes new error handling features. This was announced in the What's New and in the blog post, but we have more detailed documentation here on with some examples for error handling and for the new feature of transforming crescendo arguments. So, for example, one of my favorites, taking a PS credential parameter for your crescendo commandlet and splitting that into a username and password that gets passed on the command line to the native command. So now you can do this in your crescendo definitions. I also want to point out some major changes we made in our documentation structure. The PowerShell gallery documentation has moved. So it's still here in the main table of contents, but there's just a single page here that links you off to the new content. And with that also, we moved the PowerShell Get documentation. So if you're looking for the PowerShell Get and package management modules, they won't be here in this table of contents, but we now have up here in the level 2 navigation this link to PowerShell Get. This takes you to the new documentation set, and all the original documentation for the gallery is here. There's some new documentation for PowerShell Get, and we now have a version picker for the version of PowerShell Get for the Cmdlets. And this was our main reason for splitting this out into a separate doc set. Now we can have version-specific documentation for PowerShell Get that's not tied to the specific release of PowerShell itself. And with this, I'm publishing the commandlet reference for PowerShell Get v3. There is a slight problem with the site right now. I have an incident open to get this fixed. You'll notice that there's no reference node here. So there's a couple ways to get at this. If you did a get help, if we do get help install module online, it will take you to the web page, and you'll see the table of contents now. And I can switch to the version 3, and now we have the documentation for all the new commandlets. The other way to do it is if you go to the module browser, you can search for, why did that? PowerShell Get. And that gets you there as well. This will be fixed hopefully soon. Sorry for the inconvenience, but I think it's important with the new version of PowerShell Get to separate the documentation out into its own space. And that's my update.
Awesome, thanks, Sean. What I think we'll do first before we jump into some community demos is just touch on some of the questions that were brought up in the repo. The ordering kind of gets messed up, so we'll try to I'll try to share my screen and just we can maybe talk to some of the questions. It looks like a lot of folks have already kind of got them answered. As far as updates on Plotty PS v2 and PSSA v2, planned an ETA for new preview. DTS said we are planning to release a new preview of Plotty PS v2 in the next couple of months. This includes a bunch of commandlets like update markdown help module, and new YAML help. Is there anything you want to add to that?
On the Plotty PS?
Yeah.
Sean and Aditi have been working really hard on this, so I'm really excited about this preview because I know it's been a long time coming, and this is enabling some internal partners to complete some work and external partners as well. So we're very excited about this preview coming up. So.
Gotcha. Awesome. And
wait, so is Jim available to talk to about script analyzer, or were you going to talk to it?
Either way, if Jim's here.
I think I saw him. Jim, are you around?
I am.
Oh, cool.
Script analyzer, we haven't had a release lately. There's been no new real imperative features that have caused us to create a release. We are certainly the repository. We are reviewing the issues and taking PRs. So if you have an interest there, please don't hesitate. But we don't have any release planned soon.
Thanks, Jim. And then I see there was another question about the PR for adding type and namespace alias support. It looks like Patrick's going to take a look at that on his review.
Yeah, there's a couple of competing suggestions on that in that topic. We'll be I've actually added the engine working group to that issue, so we'll take a look at it as well in the engine working group.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Just see if there's other questions. If there's anything else, why don't we go? Thomas, are you ready to demo?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, cool. I'll stop sharing and give. I think you should have permissions to share.
Yeah, I should. Let's see here if it works. All right, can you see it?
Yes.
All right. So my name is Thomas Nieto, and I'm going to be demoing AnyPackage, which is a package management, also known as OneGit replacement. So for those of you who don't know, what is OneGit? So it was a module created by the PowerShell team. Its goal was to create a unified package management interface. So if you had a whole bunch of different package managers, you would have one set of commandlets that you could basically work with any package manager you wanted. Even if you never used it directly, you used it through PowerShell Get v2. And with PowerShell Get v3, the PowerShell team decided to move in a different direction and remove the dependency on OneGit and just use PowerShell Git directly. And so it has been deprecated. So AnyPackage, it is not a fork of OneGit. I want to be clear on that. So it doesn't share any code with OneGit. It basically just grabs some of the commandlet names and some parameter names. So if you've had issues in the past with OneGit, so like if you had various gripes with the way it was designed and stuff, if this was a from the ground up redesign of it, as such, it doesn't support any of the OneGit providers. It supports PowerShell 5.1 and above. It's cross-platform. It's written in C#. It supports PowerShell best practices such as updatable help, argument completers, and DSC resources. So some of the design goals for this was, first of all, to learn from other extensible systems, primarily OneGit, what it did well and what it didn't do well, and other PowerShell-related extensible systems. One contrast with OneGit is that OneGit was a very heavyweight framework, in my opinion. It made a lot of decisions on the framework or for the provider, like, for example, dependency management. Usually a package management system that supports dependencies has a dependency resolution logic in it. So here, AnyPackage doesn't really do a lot for the provider. It basically provides the commandlets, does some parameter validation, and lets the provider do its own work. Easily add new commandlets. So there was an issue in OneGit where back in 2015, there was a request for update package that was never resolved. So I wanted to have an easy way to add new features, new commandlets easily. Intuitive user experience. So for example, in OneGit, there was an issue with install package where it had like all of the parameters from all the various providers all in one view. So it was a little confusing for the user. Like for example, where you would install package and it had the all versions parameter, even though that was intended for find package, it showed up in install package. So that kind of stuff has been cleared up. And then a simple authoring experience, and those extensions should support PowerShell and C#. So how do we extend it? Through the concept of package providers. They're shipped as modules, they're class-based, you inherit a single class, and then you implement a single interface per operation. And what an operation is basically a one-to-one to the various commandlets. So for example, git package. And I wanted it to be able to support a mix and match of operations. So let's say if you had a provider that supported install, uninstall, but didn't have a concept of finding packages or updating packages, it would be visible to the user and it would throw the appropriate errors. And then for dynamic parameters, the providers can have their own parameters that would show up in the various commandlets. So here's a little screenshot of how to create a package provider. I'm not going to go through everything, but I just want to show you how little boilerplate code there is. You got the using statements at the top. You got your package provider attribute with the provider name. You got the class definition, which inherits from the package provider base class. And then you can see here at the end, there's an iGetPackage, which is the operation, the interface. Then it has one method there and one variable. And at the bottom is how you register it with the system and then unregister on the module after it gets removed. So here's all the existing operations and commandlets. It supports all of the OneGit ones as well as publishing and updating. And down at the bottom, the one thing I want to call out is set source. It has 3 operations there where set, register, and unregister. And here's some potential ones that can be added in the future, and it'll be fairly easy to add in. And then if the provider wants to take advantage of these features, they can implement it, but if they don't, there's no harm, no foul. And so one of the 3 that I want to call out is restoring packages. This would be like restoring from a dependencies file. Think of like NuGet restore or Python dependencies files. Optimizing packages. So this would be like apt remove, auto remove, removing outdated dependencies, and then locking and unlocking packages. So this would be like pinning a package to a specific version. And so here are the current providers that myself and Ethan Bergstrom has worked on. I got to give a big shout out to him. He's the maintainer on Chocolatey Git, WinGit, and Homebrew OneGit providers. And he ported over his code here. And MSU and programs was ported over from OneGit and then also added in a scoop one as well. And here's some potential providers that could be added in. It was mentioned, MSI, and then in the chat there was a discussion about NuGet based ones. Hopefully PowerShell Git adds in that feature so I can just leverage that and don't have to reinvent the wheel. And then Linux and Mac, since it is cross-platform, we can handle all those. And then, various application or language ones like Docker containers, Python packages, NPM, etc. All right, let's get into the demo here. So how do you find package providers? So you can use PowerShell Git since they are modules. There's 2 tags on there, AnyPackage and provider. and then you can see the 6 down there. You just install them like you would a regular module. It's already installed, so it's going to error out. And then once they're installed, you can use the list available. This is modeled after Git module list available, so you can see all of your available package providers. You got the module version and then the module that it comes from. Each module can actually ship more than one provider if they so choose. How you make them imported, you just import the module, run that, or what I like to do is just run and get all of them and import them all at the same time. So now you can see they're all imported. There's one extra column here compared to the last example, which is the priority. So for install, save, and uninstall, there's a concept of a priority. And so let's say you had 3 different package providers, so Chocolatey, Scoop, and Winget. They all have 7-zip. But when you want to install 7-zip, you don't want it from all 3 providers. So the priority is how you determine which one you want to go first. And then go ahead and run git package here since they all support that. And then the last column, you can see all the operations that they support. So it's very easy there. The first column here is the name, second column is the version, then the source, and then the provider. These 2 columns don't have to be populated if the provider doesn't have a concept of it. For example, like KBs, there's no source or version. One of the main issues with OneGit that I've seen a lot of complaints on is that the version property was a string, so you couldn't actually sort on it. But now you can. And the way that's accomplished is that this type supports 5 different version schemes. So it supports alphanumeric, integer-based, multi-part numeric, so you can have as many segmentations if you want, multi-part numeric with a suffix, and then semantic version 2. And then going down to the version parameter, I want to call this out specifically. This is modeled after PowerShell Git supporting NuGet version syntax, so stars, wildcard, everything that we're used to. The explicit version is going to return that exact version. This is a version range, so the square bracket denotes inclusive, so this is saying include 1.0 up to 2.0 exclusive, so it's not going to include 2.0. And then here's our 2 examples of a maximum only and a minimum only. One note about those is that find and get for the version range will return all packages within that version range, while install, update, and save are only going to use the latest. And so not only can we find packages by name, we can also find them by path, by literal path, and URI. I don't have an example of URI at the moment. Getting to the package lifecycle, we can go ahead and install a package. This is using PowerShell Git just to be quick and easy. So I'm installing version 1.0. Going to go ahead and update that. Oops, that's the same one. And update that. So now we got both versions installed. We can go ahead and uninstall both of them. And so here are some examples of using each individual provider. So every single package that is available to you through those providers, or those package management systems, you can use. So for example, installing 7-zip with Scoop, I can install Firefox with Winget or Python with Chocolatey. I'm not going to run through those since they take a little while to install. And then saving packages, those just copy down the package to your local file system. And here's the last example of dynamic parameters. So find package just has these 6 parameters ending in URI. And so once we have the provider specified, you can see that there are credential, tag, type, latest, and include dependencies. Those get added automatically. And getting back to here, so for some additional resources, there's a website for AnyPackage, anypackage.dev. It has the package provider catalog. It has the API documentation, the DSC resources, and PowerShell help out there. There's a GitHub organization. You can go out there. And then last but not least is provider requests. So I have a discussion category out there for all the package provider requests. They're pre-populated, went through a whole bunch of them. But if you don't see one that you have out there today, go ahead and add it. But if you want to, upvote which one you want more than others, go ahead and vote. And with that, are there any questions?
Various comments, but questions first. Start off with very cool, but anybody got questions?
Hey, great work, Thomas. One question I had was that with the versions and like your version ranges, since you support so many different kind of version types, how do you deal with all the different rules different systems have in terms of like pre-release marks and all that kind of stuff to determine that this is less than that?
Yeah, so the way it's like version range is just using the, on the first character or the last character, right? The square bracket or parentheses, right? Just the version syntax. You can put your various versions in there. It has a default logic of like doing numerical based version comparison first, but each provider can implement their own version scheme comparison if they so desire. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but.
Yeah, so I'll take a look at the code, but yeah, thanks. Really great work. Nice job. I really appreciate the way you have the interfaces laid out in such a way that like it's much more generic and allows, the implementations to be, whatever they require. So that makes it much more extensible while still providing that common interface. Very, very much really like the lessons learned from like secrets management and such like that are really well on display here. So great work.
Yeah, thanks. And Steve, for your comment, yeah, sure. If you want to update the README, then go ahead.
Okay, so a couple of just like 10-foot level questions. One, let's start off with most neurotic. Priority. I feel like we're kind of drifting towards basically verb confusion with the term priority across various commandlets. I do a similar thing in terms of n number of things could be the answer here. I tend to call it rank or order. Would you be alias happy there? And also allow it to be called rank or order? Because if I'm thinking about which one's coming first, randomly surveying users, I think rank or order more than I think priority. But I'm just me. I'm a big fan of being alias happy for exactly these reasons. So I'd love to kind of get the room's opinion on basically which of those three would be most preferred for this scenario, which keeps popping up from module to module. And I would love it if we can be alias happy to include all three.
Yeah, so specifically for AnyPackage, I just went and borrowed the PowerShell Git repo priority. So I just borrowed that, and that's where I got the name. So
yeah, and I hear you on that. It makes enough sense. Just also lots of things have rank and order at this point. So that's the neurotic one, part one. Neurotic one, part two, just ease of use. Would you ever allow someone to write a, implementation of this that's just a script, not a full class? Because classes have a few known issues with compatibility, and scripts are generally a lower barrier to entry for someone to implement.
Yeah,
you might not want a low barrier to entry though in this one.
I probably wouldn't have a function directly, but the way it's architected right now is that you can just put a function in the method definition and then just shell out to your function. I was going to have an example of that, but I didn't do that. But I can put it on the GitHub repo.
Okay. Would you want something that could bridge that for a customer, like from this shape of function, automatically wire it up to your thing?
If someone wants to do that, they can. The reason I went this way was because I could actually have the same logic for C# and PowerShell, since they're both using classes, and have them, I don't have to do, if it's PowerShell, do this thing. If it's C#, do this. Since it's using classes, I just register the type and I get to use the methods.
Sounds good. And yeah, I'll probably figure out if I can build a bridge for you.
Cool.
Thank you very much. It's really cool work.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. That's awesome. And so, James, did you want to demo a couple modules, or?
Well, it looks like we got a little bit of time. I think I'll just do one, just in the sake of timeliness. So let me start sharing one of my monitors here, the one that you're already seeing, and then drag something over to it. So the one I'm going to pick for today, because, well, we're all going to be doing a bunch of these, is show demo. Who remembers demo PS1 files or demo text files? Everybody? Some people? Who hates typoing during their demos? So demo files were a thing that we used to do during all of the PowerShell outreach way back in the day. There was an old script Jeffrey Snover written called Start Demo. It allowed you to go through line by line, have it type out the code, and wait. And, well, it got old and crusty. People stopped using it. It got a little bit out of sync with the versions of PowerShell. It never quite, ended up being able to be used as more than just a single script. And a few months ago, I said, hey, Jeffrey, you mind if I take a crack at rebuilding this? He said, okay, I don't mind. So I built show demo. And I'm just going to do a quick look at our commands here. We got start, export, get, import, resume, and show. Show is alias to start. I'm just going to go look at the demos I've got. Get a bit of a redux here because I have defined twice. But you have chapters in these. You can have numbered steps, and you can jump right to chapters. There's improvement number 1. Let's go ahead and start demo. Demo name, demo. All right, sorry, the demo here will actually be very boring to all us PowerShell people because it's for noobs, but, if you need to run Hello World in PowerShell, you can just put it there. Everything in PowerShell is objects. You can get properties by just getting length. You can do basic math in PowerShell. Get to the fun part in a second. Not the string formatting, although that is kind of fun. So I'm just hitting enter here, and it is typing out the next line of comment. And I don't have to, get my demo more right. One thing I do like to point out to people is basically how much money they can potentially earn with PowerShell. So, one of the quick endpoints of this demo is, hey, if you wanted to learn PowerShell, here's how much it's worth. All you do in PowerShell is you connect the pipeline together and connect the dots. So how much money? Well, a joke for a while has been PowerShell plus a pulse is $50 an hour. So $1 times 50 times pipe to write host foreground green, 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year. So learn PowerShell, write scripts, make money. Or for all you guys, just save your typing and demos. Oh, I guess let's show one more thing here, or at least one more thing. Demo path, demo.ps1 here. So there were some old features of the thing where you could actually get to jump to a particular chapter or step, or find a particular thing, or check how long you've been running the demo, or skip a step, or debug the demo. So all your favorite old goodies of demos are here and just in time for Summit.
Nice job, James. That was the right module pick.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I guess I do have still one bug because I can't Control-C my way out of here. But I'll tell you what, I don't have typos.
That's awesome, man.
There's a few other things I can kind of briefly point out here because of the way this module was built, just to give people tastes of crazy PowerShell skill sets that they can leverage. Sorry, after this is done telling us how much money we can earn, thank you very much. Okay, so first thing to point out with a caveat, this has a GitHub action. You can actually take any demo file and render it as a markdown file. Here's my caveat. Markdown renders in invariant culture, so that $sign didn't exactly show up as intended. But you can still put a demo into your repository, use the show demo action, and boom, have a demo markdown. Okay? So that's part 1. Part 2 is how this works. And the long story made short is formatting and types. If I look at what show demo actually does here, sorry, I've got too many files named show demo. Basically, I have a bunch of starting parameters, and I go resolve what demo I'm going to get. And then I add the current chapter and step I said I would start at, and the type speed I said I was going to use. And then I show the demo with format custom. And if I'm not interactive, I just type it out to a string. Otherwise, the formatter takes over. And inside of the formatter, you have a fairly large number of complex formatting expressions. So if the demo hasn't started, go ahead and start it. If the demo is started and is interactive and not markdown, go ahead and tell them how long it's been running. Update the window title. If we don't have a current chapter, go to the first one. If we don't have a current step, go to the next step. And if there is a current step, go ahead and try to run it unless it's hidden, in which case go ahead and handle that step in a special way. And otherwise, type out the markdown or help. And then, join all those little colorized things together and output them, or go through this and process whatever input they said and attach that. So it's all one giant complicated form editor. I'm not going to keep going down because I think the demo is getting dry. But yeah, that's one part of it. The other part of it is the type definition. There is no real type here. We just create some stuff with ETS, and then we can go to the next chapter, next step, process the input on a given one, set the chapter, set the status, start the chapter, stop thing, etc. So good old-fashioned PowerShell design here, and good use of formatting and types. And that's thrown together with easy out, just in case anybody doesn't know how I do that stuff. One last cool thing to show, just because this is one of those little statements from PipeScript that speaks 1,000 words. This is a PipeScript source file for get demo. Show demo does not require PipeScript. It was just built with it. And it does one particular fun, very easy to read trick here. All scripts in file paths that blah are demo files. This is one little example of what we can do if we break the AST open wide. We can have fully natural syntax in PowerShell. Like all scripts in current directory demos are demo files. So yeah, show demo is cool. So is the way it was built. I'll be talking through more of that next week. I guess since we have probably like 2 more minutes for a quick hit, and it's going to have a full talk anyway next week. Who knows about UGit? Okay, people are quiet, so I'm just going to go ahead and picture speaks 1,000 words. Git log, type to get member. So I have a log object that has commit date, commit hash, commit message, git command, output lines, root, username, email, merge hash, trailers, an archive method, checkout, diff, revert, reset, and reference numbers. Let's visualize that. Let's group object, commit date, day of week. And that's your brief just taste of UGit at the end. For a full dose of UGit, I have a presentation on Tuesday, I believe 11 a.m.
Awesome.
And let me know if anybody wants additional features to the demo. I guess there is one other little coolness to type out. There's one special step at this point, and that is a silent step. Anything that begins with a dot is a potential special step type, and if you wanted to add a new one, literally all it is adding a new method and taking parameters. So if we wanted to add a step that displayed an image, offered a Q&A, link to a video, this would be pretty easy to have as well.
That's awesome. And so do you have a link to kind of the repository that you can maybe share with the?
Sure, I do.
That's awesome.
Right here.
Cool.
And let me put that there, and then there's a meeting chat somewhere. Sorry, too many windows, too many desktops. I'm sure at least some other geeks on this call understand. And yeah, that's like close to the edge of our time, and I don't want to eat up too much. But thank you for having me on.
Cool. Well, thanks for sharing. I think what Justin was talking. Do you want to maybe present next community call, Justin, or do you do you think you can squeeze it in the last minute or so, your changes?
I can squeeze it in. It's not very complicated to demo, so.
Okay, cool.
So thanks very much.
Sorry.
I've just been working on a feature with the Visual Studio Code extension to be able to make it easier to write either hybrid or just straight up binary modules in either C# or F#. So here's a simple sample commandlet, slightly modified, that comes from if you go and create a new sample with the .NET new PS module. You sort of have a typical commandlet here. It's a lot more verbose than what you expect with a normal function if you've never seen this before, but it's basically just here's sort of the C# code of what that looks like. And here I have a simple test that imports my module, runs a test with a parameter, and then outputs it. So what's new, and this is available in the pre-release now and will be in the main module soon, is in your launch configuration, you now have these new examples for binary modules. And so what that'll do is it just adds these extra 2 parameters, which creates it in a temporary console and then automatically attaches the .NET debugger. So this isn't anything new. This is all stuff you could do before, but it was very kind of difficult to work with and tedious to set up. Now it's just all in a nice integrated process. So if I go and I start my binary module debug, it's going to go ahead and start up that temporary PowerShell console. And as I go, I hit my breakpoint here on the PowerShell side. And so you can see I'm on the PowerShell side here, but also I now have this new child process, this child debugger, which is actually debugging the .NET level underneath this. So when I step into my commandlet, you'll see I automatically step into the C# code, and I get all my typical information. Since I passed that favorite number is 1,000 instead of the default of 42, I can see here that am I debugger? Okay, good, that showed up there. I'm at the begin step, and I can step through my C# code and get down here and see that all this information, okay, this still shows 1,000. And as I step through here, get to the end, and as I step back through and get back out, I end up back in my PowerShell code and I can see the results. So this makes it a lot easier. If you're developing sort of hybrid modules, I use this a lot for my PowerShell AI module, or excuse me, my PowerShell Assistant module, which has an auto-generated version of the OpenAI interface. Makes it really easy to kind of go back and forth between the C# code and the PowerShell code. So simple feature, but it's implemented now. It's in the development release, the pre-release extension. It'll be in stable at the next stable version, and that is that. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin. And we are at time, pretty much to the wire. Last thing I'll do is just call out PowerShell Summit next week. A lot of us on the PM side and the engineering side will be there next week, so please feel welcome to say hi and talk to us about PowerShell, anything you've been working on, anything we can do to help improve your work and stuff. So yeah, I think that's it.
Pretty much it, yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome, man.
Cool. Thank you everyone for coming, and we will see you next month.